Welcome to First Time for Everything, a podcast for curious people. I'm your host, Danny Elliott. I've toured the world as a backing vocalist for some of the biggest names in music, owned a prop rental business, ran a vintage boutique out of a camper I renovated, and I've had a lot of firsts in my life. I created this podcast in hopes of inspiring you to take a chance on something you've been wanting to try for the first time. We're going to discover a lot of really cool stuff together, and I'm so happy you're here. Hi, first timers. We're back with our first episode of the year, and we're going to dive right into some tough stuff, divorce. I'm talking with two of my closest friends who happen to be divorcees and so generously shared their experiences with us for today's episode, Johanna Cranitch and Jessica Childress. I met Jo when I booked her for a Women's Artist Night series I used to run at a club in Brooklyn another lifetime ago, and Jess and I met when we toured together singing backing vocals for Alan Stone. They're both talented singers, composers, songwriters, and even better friends, and just some of the most kick-ass people you'll ever meet who I admire greatly. I wanted to do an episode on divorce because it's so common, and I think especially at the age we're at, mid-30s, early 40s, and we all know someone who has been divorced, but do we really know what that experience was truly like for them? And more importantly, do we know how we can better support our friends and family who are experiencing divorce? Equally as important, if you are someone who is considering divorce, I hope you find today's episode helpful and that maybe it's the final jolt of inspiration you need to leave a marriage that isn't meant for you, or maybe it brings you back to your partner and inspires you to dig deeper into your connection with them. This is First Time Talking About Divorce with Jessica Childress and Johanna Cranitch. One of the reasons you're probably listening to the show is because you like to learn new things, and Skillshare is the place to do just that. One of the founding principles of the internet was to give people access to information they wouldn't normally have access to, and Skillshare has taken this to the next level by creating 29,000 courses with new ones added to their roster every week, ranging from creative writing to marketing to website development and really whatever you're looking to get better at. You'll get to try Skillshare free for 1 month before choosing between two very affordable options at $29 a month or $165 for the year, which comes out to about $13.75 monthly, which is an insane deal for the amount of knowledge you'll be getting access to. Get 30% off your annual membership at the link in the show notes and start learning, well, everything. Now back to the show. People, we are here. I'm here with two of my best girls, Jo and Jess, and we are talking about a very complex topic today, and they have been so gracious to share their experience with you guys, and I hope anyone that is contemplating this or is currently going through it finds this really helpful and supportive, hopefully. But yeah, we're going to be talking about divorce today. And we'll just jump on into it. How long have you both been divorced now?
You
Jessica. You want me to go first? Okay.
Yes.
I have been legally divorced for a year and some change. I actually only got legally divorced in the end of April of 2022, but that's because my ex-husband stuck his head in the sand and refused to participate in court proceedings. So when that happens, you have grace periods every time a piece of paper is filed. That gives them like 90 days to respond, essentially. And when they don't respond, then you have to go back to the court, and then they make a ruling on whatever the document was. Or if you had an amendment, like they will make a ruling. But each time you do that, it takes like 90 days. So for me, it was like maybe 2 years of divorce proceedings.
Okay.
And I left him in 2018.
Wow. So I am still legally married. We are in the process of getting the legal divorce because my ex-husband, this was his idea. He initially, when we split, it was not so acrimonious. And I thought in the state of California, we could save money on taxes and insurance and things like this by staying married because we don't have any kids, we don't own a house together, et cetera, et cetera. And then last year, he decided that he wanted to get legally divorced. And so I said, if you want to do that, you're going to do all of the work, serve me, and I'll give you all the things that you need. I gave him all the things that he asked for, and he too has been dragging his feet and kind of not able to fully pull the trigger. So,
Interesting. For both of you, in terms of them dragging their feet, Joe, you initiated yours. Jess, it sounds like your ex initiated yours. Like, what is the feet dragging part of it? Because it seems like when it's, you want it to be over, right? And just be able to move on. Like, for each of you, if you feel comfortable talking about what made that process take a while, what's making it currently take a while. Is it legal stuff? Is it like
well,
relational stuff?
it's our divorce, our actual legal divorce is so cut and dry. It's a no contest state, meaning that everything is split 50-50 in the state of California unless you have a pre-existing agreement.
Okay.
And
And you
so,
don't have any joint assets either, do you?
right, exactly. So there were some things that we bought together, including the only sticky things for me were my intellectual property in terms of my music, which I did not realize
Did not
was,
know. Did you? I didn't know either. I didn't know either. I didn't know either.
bro.
So
Yo,
they can have access to
get a prenup.
royalties.
Get a prenup. Everybody get a prenup. Yes. For the entirety of your marriage, your legal marriage, any work that you create during that period of time, if it's not specified in a
Prenuptial.
that's it, prenuptial agreement, they are entitled to a percentage portion of your intellectual property. So any syncs you get, any licenses you get, any music that you write that becomes successful, they can own
And let
50.
me add to that thing, which is what my attorney friend told me. If Clint remarries,
Oh
Hmm.
yeah, then
then
yes,
he
yes,
owns my a
she
portion of
does.
my intellectual
Yes.
property.
Fuck that.
Yep. Yep.
So it was that, and then like our studio equipment were the only
Mm,
things that we had to even file. There's like a financial disclosure, so we everything was so clean, joint account, and then these two things, and we just he paid me out for the stuff that we had gone halves on because he wanted to
mhm,
keep it, and I'm not a front of house engineer.
mhm.
And he relinquished any rights to my intellectual property.
Okay.
But I think what is the feet dragging of it is that he decided to file for divorce not because he wanted to be divorced, but because he wanted to make a statement about his
Mm.
independence. But in reality, I was the
Oh,
one
for me, by the way, same in reverse. So we're
interesting.
gonna, yeah, keep going.
So
Sorry.
he has now realized that like I was the one who found the insurance to find a doctor and a specialist for his pre-existing conditions. I'm the one that organized all of that. I'm the one that like managed like the household. Ugh, that actually gives me the heebie-jeebies to think about. But and so I think now that the rubber is hitting the road of like, okay, well, I'm gonna be on the union insurance. And good luck to you, because I don't know what you're gonna do. He's a little hesitant now.
Wait, so you're saying that a man hasn't valued the emotional and mental labor that a woman has been bringing into the
So
Yay,
unusual.
relationship?
shocking.
I'm
So
so,
unusual.
I don't,
Wow.
I have never heard, what?
Yeah, strange.
Huh. Okay. And Joe, you're saying yours is the opposite or in reverse.
Yeah, so my ex-husband is notorious for sticking his head in the sand. He will always hide behind the fact that his religion states that he is a pacifist, but he refused to participate in any court proceedings, especially pertaining to our son. And I believe it to be because at the end of our relationship, he had very little power left. Not that, power, it's a weird thing to say about a relationship, but I can imagine he probably felt quite emasculated by everything that had been going on, and he's unwell, as you both know. Like
Mhm.
he's not himself because of other reasons, and I think that this was a way that he could keep me captured a little bit still
Mm.
Mm,
by not making by making something that should be easy difficult. He was like sticking it to me a little bit, and he still is. He still
mm.
is. I'm still dealing with a lot of the fallout because I had a terrible lawyer who took me for a financial ride. And even last week, I only just found out that she didn't put the right box for child support versus child care. So the child support agencies can only legally enforce child support, and she had me list child care even after I explicitly said to her that I wanted a fair split down the middle 50-50 of like child support, like the
Oh,
financials that it costs to have Max and have the
Mm,
care that I need in order to work to pay for Max because he doesn't pay anything.
mm.
jeez.
And so I haven't been able to enforce any child support upon him for 6 years. I think he's paid over the course of 6 years, maybe $2,000, maybe, and refuses to pay. Absolutely, just like will not, just won't pay. So, so actually, this happened last week that I got the child support, a call from the agency saying that because on my divorce declaration, which included a document that specifies like who gets legal guardianship and everything, that because that box was ticked instead of child support box, that they can't enforce it.
So is there a way to retroactively like go back in and figure that out or file something new?
Yeah, I could file something new. I can also file a civil lawsuit against him. There's a few avenues I can go down, but I think, to be honest, at this point, I mean, I'm the unfairness, the unjust nature of everything that's happened in the last couple of years between he and I and the court and this lawyer, like every step of the way of of this divorce and this separation from this man has been so traumatic for me that I think I'm tapped. I
Mm,
last week was a
yeah.
bad week, so I think I'm honestly like tapped at trying to create a fair
Yeah. An
and also
equitable
to be honest,
situation that
one
won't
that
be.
financially can help because I'm doing it all myself. Like obviously, the other
Mhm.
side of what I'm doing by myself and that I do have help and I do have support, but
That
shouldn't
costs.
that the cost shouldn't be burdened towards somebody else. You know what I'm trying to say? It
Yeah.
shouldn't come from my parents helping to pay for my child. It
Mhm,
should come from him, and he
mhm.
refuses.
Mm.
That leads actually to a question about lawyers. Like, do you guys have advice for what you should be looking for in a lawyer or how to find a lawyer when you are thinking about going into this process?
No, because I Googled, and my dad's a
Oh,
lawyer, as you know.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't have any recommendations for a divorce lawyer. I think your best bet is to just like Google on Yelp, and I did quite a bit of research on Yelp, and this lawyer had 5 stars. She took me for an absolute ride, and then after the divorce was basically going through, and she did a terrible job the entire way. She then tried to hit me with a $15,000 bill for emails. And then when I asked to see the log, which is your legal right
yeah, the
Mhm.
to
billable
see your money's
hours.
being spent, she refused to give it to me. And then I had my dad get involved, and then with his lawyer legal
Yeah.
letterhead, sort of basically saying we're going to pursue action. Um, she then wrote back a very nice email saying, "Don't worry, we've let it go. All the best to you." And then last week I found out that the paperwork was actually all filed incorrectly. And oh, and also she didn't tell me that because I was the co-signature on his car, that the only way to get my name off it would be in the divorce proceedings. Is like when you separate your stuff, like I told her that I had was a co-sign on his car, and she said, "Oh, well, that's fine. Don't worry about that because that's his car."
Mm.
But now I had my tax. check come back last week with $500 garnished because he has fines on his car and they took it from me because he also refuses to pay that.
Oh,
So
baby
they took it from
Jesus.
my income. So sorry to bogart this portion of the conversation.
No,
But what I would say is
this is all super
I wish
helpful to know.
I wish I could have some like, I learned this and next time I will do this. No, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I think if you can get recommendations from people you know, um,
Hmm.
and respect, even if it's coming like from 5 degrees of separation, take that. Don't go to Yelp. That would be
I
Okay.
was just gonna say the Yelp, Google situation, I have been burned by that with attorneys before. I had been involved in a car accident years ago, and basically my car malfunctioned and I needed representation because I was injured. And I Googled and found somebody that had 5 stars. It turned out to be a shit show. For this divorce, even though I knew it was not going to be acrimonious, I went to a couple friends of mine, including my former talent manager, and who had recently been divorced, and asked him for a recommendation. And then that lawyer recommended me to somebody that I could afford. And what ended up happening is that I didn't need to retain her services. What I needed was 2 hours on the phone where I paid 500 total dollars, and she walked me through what was about to happen, what sorts of things I needed to disclose. Here are some pitfalls to look out for. Here are the things that you really got to be specific on. And so we had two separate 1 hour conversations, and that was not the homie deal. That was like the regular deal.
Hmm.
But again, we didn't have like shared assets or a child. And then once I got served with all the paperwork and could like go through my notes of what she had said versus what was here, I sent an email. And I just really recommend, if your first instinct is to pick up the phone if you have a question, like put that to the side and really get everything in writing with anyone ever always.
Okay.
You think a
anything ever,
conversation,
always. Anything ever, always.
anything ever always. So when I thought to, oh, let me just double check this thing, like no, no, no. Because if there's one thing you learn in things like this is people that you think you can trust, sometimes you can, but sometimes you really cannot. So I got everything in writing, sent her my question. She emailed me back. I think she charged me like total for all the email correspondence, like another $100. But she did not need to represent me. And then as I was moving forward, her advice to me was don't have in-person conversations about anything relating to this, even though he's like your good friend and you guys are still like feeling good. She's like, people go from not feeling good to feeling really bad. So do
Really
everything via
quickly.
text.
Really,
Yeah,
and it
so
can happen
fast.
really quick. I thank God I have a paper trail. I have a friend who is in a worse, I would argue in a worse domestic violence situation than I was in. And I was in, that was like the tail end of our relationship. I had to actually get a restraining order against him because it got so volatile. And I was genuinely, I'm not being dramatic, genuinely afraid for my son being in his presence because I didn't feel that he was well enough to care for him. I have a friend who's going through something that I think would arguably be on paper way worse, but because she doesn't have the paper trail of it, they denied her request for a restraining order for her children's safety.
Yeah.
And they gave one, I mean, all it took was for me to give the proof that I was being abused and harassed, and they signed it that day. I mean, there was no argument that I was being harassed and abused and that it was getting into a dangerous situation. But had I not had the paper trail of like the
Mm.
threats that he was making towards me and the continuous harassment, it would be like 80 to 100 text messages between like 11 and 5 a.m. and only ever when he was with our son because he knew I would never block him. It was absolute psychological warfare. He would only do it when he knew that I would not be able to block his phone number because he was with our son. And then it got scary because, anyway. Yeah, paper trail. You got to have a paper trail. You have to have everything with your ex in writing. You should always, and you keep a folder of it, and you just because. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to trust the people that you once loved, and hopefully everybody gets to have a calm ending to their relationship with an already traumatic experience. But to your point, it gets hairy very quickly, and it can
Very
switch
quickly.
in a
It's
second.
insurance for you, like
Yeah.
regardless of how things are going currently.
I wanted to mention on the finding a lawyer front that obviously the ideal situation is that someone who had a positive experience can recommend, a marriage and family attorney. I mean, I feel like we all know somebody who's been divorced, but if that is not a possibility, find a recommendation for any lawyer that someone you know has had a positive experience with, because the world of attorneys at law is very connected. And a lot of times, if, for example, I had a great, like, personal injury attorney, but I don't know a marriage and family attorney. Well, I would ask that guy for a recommendation and he would know somebody. And I always think whenever you're retaining the services of somebody in this kind of a situation, it's always good for them to have a little bit of skin in the game, like
Mm.
their reputation on the line with somebody that they know that they've worked in. That's just my personal
No,
paranoia.
I think that's really true because I think especially, and my dad said this to me too, which was remarkable, and he said the same about Australian law, that family law is notorious for sharks, like people
Yeah.
that just take advantage of people that are in vulnerable states, which is exactly what happened to me. I mean, I was on the phone with this lawyer, she was asking me questions all the time, and I was in such a traumatized state because I'd just had the restraining order administered and it was just so traumatic. And I'd be crying trying to answer these very perfunctory questions. And she'd be like, "Oh, darling, I'm so sorry this is happening to you." And completely took me for a ride financially, knowing full well where the state I was in. And I think that's a very vulnerable place to be in when you have to get and seek legal advice. The reason we do that is because we don't know the law. We're paying and trusting somebody to know, hey, just want to clarify and make sure you know that I'm ticking child care because of this X, Y, and Z reason, or do you want me to tick child support because these two things mean a different thing? Like, I'm trusting my lawyer to know this information.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know the law. The other thing I want to recommend is that you make sure to ask what happens every time they send an email, because some people will give you a blanket price, like, I will do your divorce, and then you just correspond, and that's that. But the majority of it is by hourly and also by email. So every time you have a question, they may be charging you to respond to the email without telling you ahead of time that every time you have a question and they have to respond to you, they're going to charge you. So I think that's also a really important thing to know.
I just want to speak to the ignorance, because hopefully this is your first divorce, whatever the case is.
First one was way easier.
Then it's all downhill from here. I know
Sorry.
I'm staying single for the rest of my life.
That's a question I want to get into later for sure.
I
But
know
yeah.
that for me, when it was about to be real that we were gonna be divorced, I remember feeling a tremendous amount of um like I didn't want people to know that's what was going down, and I felt a little embarrassed to, like, get recommendations or talk to friends.
Mm.
It just felt it I had not fully wrapped my arms around it yet. So talking to other people and asking for recommendations and getting advice and having to do the, oh my God, you guys are broken up, that whole thing, I had a lot of hesitance. And my first instinct was like, I'm going to handle this on my own and people are going to know about it when it's a done deal. But my parents are divorced. My mom was like, Jessica, Do not do that. This is not one of those times to like stand in your pride. This is one of those times to circle the wagons, get professional help, and make sure that you're doing this to the letter, jot, and tittle of the law of what you want. Period. We love Clint. He's amazing. This doesn't seem bad, but good people get bad. So just
Yeah.
to say, like, don't let your pride stand in the way of you getting what is owed to you.
Mm.
Yeah, and people who feel that they're pushed into a corner, no matter how nice they are, when they feel that they're pushed into a corner, will respond in
Yeah.
kind, you know? And it's just, it's not, I don't think it's a bad thing to always consider that no matter what, something can always go wrong. So you have to just protect yourself.
And on that tip too, like more of the like emotional side of things, I think for anyone listening who might be considering, asking their partner for a divorce, and you guys have obviously things led to the dissolution of your marriages in different ways, but when you were thinking about actually deciding to do this, was it like a clear moment for you that you were like, I'm going to do this? Or was it kind of a gradual thing that you finally came to this moment that was like, we need to get divorced?
Jess, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can. I'd like to, I'd like to be able to say that the moment where I did have that inner knowing that this should be the end, that I rallied my courage and asked for the separation. I would like for that to be true. That is not what happened, unfortunately. There was a very clear moment in 2018 after about a year and a half of just horror, just a lot of like emotional unsafety
Mm.
and some really dark things that went down. And then there was a moment in time where he crossed a line, and that should have been it. And for whatever reason, I made excuses that I gaslit myself that it was like my fault and I have contributed to this. So if I could just change the way I am, then that will help him change. And I went on this journey of like a deep journey of like healing, and came to 2020 COVID. So like 2 and some change years after, I was like, this should be over. And being in quarantine together made it very clear that the person I had become as a result of, the last year and a half of healing was incompatible with this lifestyle. And I said at one point, like, I cannot do this anymore. Things have to change. And his response to that, rather than hearing my like, we should go to couples therapy, we should consider this, that, and the third, his response to like things have to change was like, okay, goodbye. He got in our shared vehicle, drove to his mom's house in Texas during the middle of COVID and the protests around Black Lives Matter, which I'm in the middle of downtown. So, like, right there, left me carless and alone, and then didn't come back for a month. And that was kind of how our relationship dissolved, was me kind of disempowered and feeling a lot of regret for not having stood up for myself and walking away.
Yeah.
Oh,
How
Joe.
about,
Oh no, I remember that period for you. I'm having tears because I remember what that moment was
It was really bad.
before, before the COVID moment, and it was scary for you. Um, yeah, no, I had a few similar. Jessica and I have a bit of a parallel path on in some instances in our marriages that became unsafe, and I think I experienced the same thing, and it was about a year leading up to me leaving. And it was very complicated because I had a baby and I was so terrified how I was going to manage on my own. And the thing that kept me for that year in that relationship, which was extremely unhealthy at that time, with the introduction of our child, things just got exponentially worse with him, and became increasingly unsafe in the house. I was too scared. It was, I think, being a new mother and dealing with pretty bad postpartum depression, which I had, and being in a country where I didn't have my family, I was terrified to make the change because I didn't trust that I would survive it on my
Mhm.
own. And I didn't trust that I was strong enough to be a single mum and be able to provide for my son emotionally and in a practical sense. But so it's a bit of both for me to answer the question. It was like the year leading up to it was a thing I was already thinking about, and I had spoken to my parents about it even. I was, this is these things are happening, and we had a few very dark episodes and a few unsafe things that happened, and I would tell my parents about it, and it was I think collectively agreed upon that I was mentally not in a place to make such a big life change, and that we should wait until, or I should wait until I was in a better space and strong enough to be able to make that choice. And then we had one thing happen over Christmas, and it was like, I think it was like the 27th of December or something on in 2018, because my parents were here for Christmas, and I
Mm.
just looked at him after this one thing that had happened that day, and I could not for 1 second longer pretend that it was okay and that it was acceptable. And I looked at him and I said, I'm not doing this for the next 40 years of my life. I'm too young, and I refuse to settle for this situation because I deserve better and my son deserves better. And I walked out of the house with the baby, and I took my parents, and we left for a few hours, and then I came back and I said, you have to leave. And we had a thankfully a big enough house, and he moved into the upstairs bedroom, and I knew that he didn't have any money, so I said, okay, you can stay in the house, help me with Max. So he stayed from January till March, which was awful, absolutely just awful. But he wouldn't leave, and I kept being like, you have to figure yourself out, and you have to find the money to move because you cannot stay here any longer. So I had that one moment where I was like, not 1 second longer, and that was it. Like I never looked back from that moment, and I'm so
Mm.
proud of myself that I worked up the courage to make that choice. But I would say that it was a year leading up to me having like a definitive moment. But there was a
Mm.
definitive moment.
Yeah, I was wondering about that with, just divorce in general, but like with you guys, like, I mean, we've obviously talked about this, for anyone listening, like Joe, Jess, and I are all very close, like to each other. And so this is stuff we've talked about, just trying to think about how to phrase it in like a public setting. What do you guys wish that your like friends and family could understand about what you've gone through in this process? Or what do you feel like isn't really thought about or factored in when like friends and family are trying to talk to you about divorce?
I think it's like the depth of the grief of the acknowledgement that the plan you had didn't work out, which is separate. It's separate to the person and the divorce itself. It's you have a, regardless of who ends the relationship or how well or badly the divorce goes, there is always a layer of grief that comes, that and sits at your dinner table every night and makes you remember that you didn't plan for this to happen.
Mm.
And even if you're happy that it's over, you never planned for it. And
Mm.
there's all sorts of, you feel like a failure. Like Jess was saying, I didn't really want to talk about it because I didn't want everyone being like, oh my God, you broke up. There's a sense of like you didn't do something right. Or in my case, I should have kept the nuclear family together for the sake of my son. For me, that was a big thing, the guilt and the shame surrounding it, but also the grief, a huge, huge layer of grief. And I think it's just, you can't, and it's, people say this all the time, but I even find it hard executing this myself, but you just have to show up. You just have
Mm.
to show up. And if that person doesn't text you back, um, showing up, continuing to show up is so powerful, even just via a text message. Even if you send a text message for 4 months in a row and never get a response, that's real love and real family. Because I experience it, thankfully, with the people in my life who love me, which I'm so grateful for. People showed up, they just showed up.
Critical. Yes, the grief is so immense and it's so layered. And also something that I wish, and I wouldn't know how to say it, but in those years leading up, there were a few people that knew how bad it had become and how dark. And I was getting advice from friends like, you deserve better and you should do X, Y, and Z. And I just want to say to the friends, to the allies, like, we know, we know that it's bad, and we know that we're choosing something that is bad. Like, we know it's not the knowledge that, like, that this is okay. Like, we don't think it's okay. We know it's bad, but there's this deep feeling of like fear, unworthiness. There might be some like literal logistical financial things that are keeping us there. It is not for lack of desire or lack of information that
Which
people
also
say,
goes back to the why people don't leave. This is, I
"Oh,
never realized how quickly you can go from being in a normal relationship to being psychologically and physically abused. And it
yeah."
happens so quickly.
It takes a minute sometimes to rally your emotional and mental resources to make that big change, not knowing if it's going to be okay and how you're. For me, I'm a musician. I didn't have a lot of money saved. For many years of my relationship, I relied on my husband to pay. I left a really good paying job when we first got married to pursue music. And I had just started to really find my footing. And then the pandemic happened. And so there was this big fear of like, how am I going to be able to pay for all these things by myself? There's some real logistical things that have to be like worked out. And then that huge leap of faith to say, okay, I can do this on my own. That takes a minute to get your arms around it. So a little bit of grace because we know and we already feel bad about ourselves that we're still there. We already feel bad.
Mm.
And the well-meaning, like, you deserve better than this, and no man should ever, and like, it sounds good to you, but to us, to me, it felt a lot like, you should know better. Like, what are you
Yeah,
doing?
it drives,
Mm.
it's so well meaning, but it drives home a little bit the fact that you didn't leave for so long.
Mm.
But I
Yeah,
guess, the other thing is, Danny, this is specific to our situations, and there are lots of people who just have the most perfect relationship and wake up tomorrow going, I don't want to be married, and there's no real reason why, and everything's great and it's fine. And they may have the same concerns financially, somebody's supporting you. So,
mm,
I think regardless of what the conditions are, there should always be a layer of grace, as Jess says. Just like,
Mm.
yes, everybody deserves to have the love they want in their lives and be treated the way they want to be treated. How we all are treated or want to be treated is very subjective. We all have different wants and needs, but a layer of grace and just showing up
yeah.
for your friends is so much better than you deserve better. No man should ever.
It's
We
Let
know.
me
yeah.
let me just
We know.
file an apology here
You
because
never.
I'm
No, you never.
sure
No, you never.
at
No, you
some
never did.
point I
No, you never
implied
did.
it.
No, you never
You
did.
know what you do that I always want? I need that fuck that guy energy. Like, what do you want to do? Do we want to roll up? Like,
Yeah.
that's the energy I need. I need
Okay.
aggressive affection.
Yeah, yeah, and I have to say I have one friend who was actually I would say she's besides our nanny, she and her husband because they were living in my back house are the only two people that truly saw it and knew just how
Mm.
bad the behavior was because I think a lot of people were like, is it really as bad as she's saying? They were the only people that like really saw it, like saw the abuse, saw the text messages, saw the hysteria and saw, they were part of the day that, which was the last day we saw my ex-husband because he's out of my son's life. He refused to bring him back home after pushing him on an iPad. He was on his iPad and he was upset with me and then shoved my son on his shoulder saying, "Go on, ask your fucking mother what she does for a living," because he was mad at me and then refused to bring him back. My friends stepped in. They called him because he refused to answer to me and just ignored me and disappeared with our son. And like basically did exactly what Jess is saying. Like, fuck you, motherfucker. I'm gonna call the police. Get Max back here right now. And then her husband was the one that actually went and got my son from the car because he was just like, no, nobody goes near this guy. Like,
Mm.
no, absolutely not.
Mm.
And that was that big fuck you energy, and she still has it, and I love her for it.
That lion energy, like
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that is
show.
the thing we
That
want.
is showing up. That's the showing up of like, what do you need? Do you need,
Yeah.
are we doing the big guns today? Do you want a hug? Do you want a sound bath? Do you want to roll up on somebody? Like that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Are
I don't
there
know how
other
much of this you're going to be able to use.
I was going to use all of it. Are you fucking kidding me? Are there other ways that people showed up for you that you're like, that's really helpful in addition to the fiery, like, let's roll, vibes?
Mm.
Childcare for me, that was a big thing. Like, my beautiful friends took Max, and it would be just like, hey, I'm gonna come pick Max up because my kid's gonna play with your kid, so you can have a couple of hours to yourself. And it's, that was so it's and it still is
Girl,
so.
you better let me do it more often when I move back in with you in January. You keep turning me down. That's my boy. Okay. This bitch over
I
here,
mean,
I have offered so many times and she's like,
no,
no,
it's
no.
really hard for me. It's really hard for me to turn anything around on myself. I have if it's work related, I will text you back immediately. If it's personal, I can't. I have a really hard time facing anybody that wants to support me. I don't know why. I can't. Ugh. I can't like actually pull the
I
trigger and be
know.
like, actually,
I
can you take him? I know you've offered, but can you? I can't do it. Just the shame about it, the guilt, the also I feel guilty for needing time,
Mm.
that you
I
should have somebody else, that you should need it so much that your friend has to take your kid.
it's you know what, and I'll say this as the friend, it's never a has. It's a want. I love him.
I know,
He's
and
awesome.
you're not the
Like
only one that said that. It's
it's
just
a gift, like he's a part of you. Like I love hanging out with him, and you deserve time. It's like you're doing this by yourself and you're fucking crushing. Like you deserve all the time that you need in order to be the best version of yourself for yourself and for him. So it's like we've talked about this many
I know,
times. So
I know. Well, thank you. I will
I
need to
have
come back.
I have to say, Joe, I fully relate to that. And Danny, as you were asking that
The
question,
same,
I'm like,
bitch. You're the same. You have a really hard time accepting help from
that's what
anybody
I was gonna
or
say. Is it?
love.
this is why we're all friends with each other.
I don't even. I wish that I had let my friend show up for me, but I did not because I have a very deep and real discomfort with being any type of burdensome to anyone, even if they tell me repeatedly that they are not burdened by me. It's like,
Me
I
too.
don't care how you feel, I feel burdensome. And so I would rather sit alone in the dark in my depression than be like, hey, I need some help. So it got to a point where I was so horribly depressed that I was a little bit scared. And that
Mm,
was the only thing I was like, I should probably give someone a key just in case.
mhm.
I do wish that I had allowed myself to be
Where's my
held.
key? Where's my
What?
key?
Where's my key?
You're in Amsterdam. You have to not live in
I
Amsterdam, and then
mean,
you can have a key.
I can hop a flight.
I should probably give all y'all a key, although I'm doing much better now.
I mean, listen, if you don't feel like you need to, I'd rather have you be in that space, but
I will say the healing that I've been doing in therapy post this whole thing has been about recognizing that I I don't have to be grateful for whatever I get. I am
mm,
allowed to take up space. I'm allowed to have standards, high standards. I'm allowed to ask for people to show up for me. And I'm allowed to not just be a ray of sunshine all the time. I can allow people to see that I'm struggling, that
mhm,
I'm messy. I'm allowed to, because when other people are going through this, it's such a joy for me to hold space for that and show up for people in that way. I just, for whatever reason, have decided that I am somehow uniquely unworthy of that level of care. And I think that goes hand in hand with the reason that I stayed in my really shitty married marriage for such a long time is that there was this deep thing of like, you should just be grateful for what you get and
mm.
just grit your teeth and bear it, and maybe it'll get better, but maybe it won't. But either way, at least you have a husband.
Why do
Yeah.
so
And
many of us feel that way? You know what I mean? And it's not just in marriage, though. You know what I mean? It's like in so many things, we're just like, oh, we should just be grateful. We should just be happy that like this, we have something or someone or some, you
Well,
know?
Daniel, I can say
I
for
mean,
for us,
yeah, I know what it is for us.
it's my very religious upbringing was
Yeah.
like, you are born unworthy of anyone's love.
Mm, mm-hmm,
And your love and your worth has to be earned by doing things and by being a blessing
mm-hmm,
and by all of these things. And I didn't realize how deeply that
mm,
has penetrated my whole being. And I'm still learning, I'm still learning. My ex-husband and I had a really tricky day just recently, and we're good friends.
mm-hmm,
And I think it was the first time that I was able to sit across from him and hear some of the things he was saying. And it really hit me as wrong instead of
mm,
normal.
mm.
And it's a work in progress,
Yeah.
really getting that sense of worthiness. And also I think it's like the patriarchal what makes a woman have status in society is by being a good mom, having a husband, being a great hostess. All of these
Mm,
things are markers of achievement and status. And I think that even though women are in the workplace and are being seen as more whole people, there is not the same status of like being the boss
mm.
as it is like, I'm the boss, I'm the CEO, and also I juggle my three kids, and also I work out 7 days a week, 1 hour with my trainer. It's like these are still the markers of success for women, and it's
Yeah.
kind of
it's true.
beautiful.
And you're supposed to do it all. Do it
Yeah,
all. Exercise, have your full-time job, have your career, raise children, be married, be a wife,
and
which
suck it
as
up
we've
if your
all
marriage is bad.
I think it's starting to become more clearer on a general wide social level that the distribution of labor in the household really is just so off kilter. And I
Mm,
think that 2023, 2022, like maybe a little bit of 2021, since we've all been working from home, has kind of shifted that a little bit for a lot of people. I think we as women are finally starting to get a little bit more, not what we deserve, but a little bit more recognition for just how much we actually do. Not
mm,
to say that there aren't men that do a lot too. There are, of course, I'm speaking in a very general, broad sense, but I think a lot of that thing that you and I are talking about, the lack of self-worth, comes and stems from that patriarchal societal, that narrative that we have all grown up with. Don't take up too much space in a room if you're a woman. um, do all of the things if you're a woman, but don't expect a man to do the same things if you're a woman. I
mm,
cannot speak to being a black woman, but assured that there is an entire four other layers or so of trauma surrounding that. And like,
Yeah.
I think that our shared collective as women, even though we have different experiences, really shape that narrative and have shaped that narrative in our children's books, in our TV shows. And I think we're just only starting to slightly undo that.
Mm.
Bro, I was having a conversation with my mom, and let me tell you something. Ending your marriage in your 30s, right? For the same, when the same things were going on in like your parents' marriage, and what I saw my mom do is suck it up.
Mm.
And I don't have to suck it up because I'm no longer in that relationship. But I think we've watched our mothers suffer in silence or suffer in anger, but like stick it out. And the mark of a good marriage and a good person is when the times get tough, you stick it out no matter what. And I think younger women are like, stick it out for who? For what? Why would I do that?
I think we're the last generation that grew up believing that. I think the next generation, exactly. Like who, what? No. I mean, even up until a couple, like 2 years ago, the nuclear family that I was holding on to so tightly was really very much supported by my parents. The decision to leave, the decision to remove my ex-husband from his child for that period where I had to get a restraining order, even that was very, very considered. We had family discussions about it. What would happen? What about Max? He needs two parents. He needs a mum and a dad because they believe that this model is the perfect model for a child's
Right.
development. A
Mm.
man, a woman together.
Mm.
So, thankfully, I do think we're the last generation that has been brought up with that um,
I hope so.
Yeah.
desirable family model because the younger generation are growing up going, why do we need to get married to have kids? And
Yeah,
a
and
man
you
and a man
don't.
can have a kid, a woman and a woman can have a kid, a
Yeah.
single woman can have a kid. How novel. It's so liberating to live in
Yeah.
this space with all these people that are changing it with us, for us. It's so.
Yeah, I mean, well, that perfectly leads into like my next question. How do you guys feel about marriage now? Is it something that you would consider doing again at some point? Are you good? Like, have you met the quota? Like, you're like done it. No, thank you. Or
This is like, nope.
There is one circumstance that I would get married again. Two,
Mhm.
two. And you know what? I'm being dead ass. I would marry a billionaire
Mhm. Not mad at it.
because it's going to be trouble either way. And I would love to have trouble on a yacht. You know what I mean? A yacht in my name.
Yep.
Or I would get married for a European passport.
I mean, hell yeah.
I'll marry you, Jess. I have a European passport.
You
Come
She
on.
do?
does.
Yes,
She
I'm
does.
Irish.
Is this a formal proposal? Because
Totally. Will you marry me?
This would work. Actually, this would
I
work great.
agree. But like I don't think the idea of getting married for love holds any water.
Mm.
And to me, because there's no reason to link yourself legally to a person if it is not a business transaction.
Mm.
Because that's why people got married before, because it was a business transaction.
Mm.
And so I will get married for a business transaction.
They
For
also didn't live as long as we live now. That's the other thing to consider on a
Great
societal
point.
level and culturally. Like humans didn't live as long as they live. The expert when marriage, well, marriage is still popular, but when it was such a nuclear family in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s even, people didn't live till they were 100. We're going to live
20s was
till we're
middle
100.
age.
20s was considered middle age. You had to get married and have children. That's been the attitude for centuries.
Mhm.
You know? I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't think I would get married legally, but I think the idea of the romantic notion surrounding marriage still compelling to me, but only because I am a hopeless romantic and I will always be looking for love. you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I probably wouldn't get married again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, would I have a spiritual marriage? Maybe a little party to celebrate being with someone for like 10 years. Like if I'm with
Mm-hmm.
someone for like 10 years,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me it'd be more of a commitment to buy a house with someone at this point, you know, to get into a financial situation, legally
Yeah.
binding financial situation with somebody would is to me much more of a commitment than marriage because as we've seen with my two divorces, you can exit. Marriage doesn't mean you can't exit. You can.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Were there or are there currently any tools, practices that you guys used or are currently using that have helped you navigate the process during and post the divorce? I know, Jess, you were saying therapy has been
therapy.
very helpful.
Therapy was so helpful. Also, um, having a really intentional daily spiritual practice has helped me tremendously in my life, but especially in severing the emotional tie in that sense,
Mm,
because it was a daily reminder of my individuality, my personhood, that I am a standalone, autonomous person, and having that daily practice to remind me that the my world exists without him was critical. And then I was journaling a lot about, okay, what are the things that I liked to do before I met him that I stopped
mm,
doing? And really intentionally doing those things. Like, I used to love to go salsa dancing. I used to go every week at least. And my ex-husband hated dancing. He hated to do anything where he had to learn something in public, which is literally one of my favorite things to do. So I started to go salsa dancing. I took a pottery class. I went to the farmer's market. I took a cooking class. Like, I remembered that I like to be out in the world trying new things. And anything that like brings you back to your individual personhood, I think is helpful to what's the word when you're all disentangle yourself
yes.
from an
Yes.
us into a me.
Mm, I
Yeah,
love
I
that.
second that. I think that's God, that's such a good thing to say, Jess, because it's so true. Just I think a lot of people will be like, you got to get on the apps, you got to go out on a date. Absolutely not if you don't want to. You know, if that makes you feel empowered and good, then sure. But it's such I find that it's such a time for reflection when you leave a marriage. It's such a big life shift. It's not something you just walk away from and go, well, that didn't work, like it's a little bit more involved than that. And finding your way back to yourself is such an important piece of that puzzle that when you're putting yourself back together, that has to be taken into account. I didn't date for an entire year purposely because I was so traumatized. And I think I still am. Like I still have
Of course.
a lot of sort of problems with dating in general just because I'm so shell shocked still after my experience. But I think what helped in that year was that I was so hyper focused on my family, my son, getting my shit together with work, getting my career in a good place, reading, going and doing things that felt joyful, spending time with my friends, being myself again, writing music again. I didn't do that for a really long time. And I had to spend a year doing that because I needed to put myself back together before I could be good
Mm,
for somebody else.
yeah.
Still not. But I'm working on it.
Yeah, you were.
I want to hug you through the computer. You have done such a good job.
Oh, thanks, Jess.
You've
I'm
done
trying.
such a good job. And it is not easy to even as you casually say that you are a hopeless romantic and you're still so open to the idea of that big love. Like, that is such a beautiful overcoming of something so deeply
Mm-hmm.
damaging.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I I don't know that I would feel that way if like the father of my child betrayed me in such a deep earth-shattering way. I think I would be in such a state of
I know,
fear.
I know, and I was, and I have been, and it's not over, but life is so short but inexplicably long, and there is so much life to live, and there is so much hope in the world, and you can't allow an experience, no matter how bad it is, to shape the rest of your life. Because if
Mm,
you do, then that wins. And the
yeah.
only person it affects at the end of the day is you. And we have to move on and we have to move forward and we have to put one foot in front of the other, no matter how hard it is. And we just got to do it. Like you just have
Mm,
to do it. And I think that really says a lot about, you know, my enthusiasm for friendships and life and love again is that I think it's just so important to keep living and keep celebrating all the things that are great, because there can be so many bad things, and but we're all still here, right? Like you're
I
still
could
here,
cry,
you're
Joe.
still smiling, and you're having great experiences since too. Sorry, I don't know if I was supposed to say his name.
He's
Since
not gonna listen
too.
to this.
And it's only going to continue, and in 10 years time, what may still be painful won't be as hard to consider in 10 years. And you gotta put, my mother always says it, you gotta put one foot in front of the other. And even if you don't feel like smiling, you smile and you walk out of the house and you do your day and you live your life, because at the end of the day, if you keep just going through the motions, eventually your heart will follow and it will
Mm,
catch up. But if you sit and stagnate over the thing that has destroyed you and ruined you, you'll never survive. And then that
Yeah,
experience wins over the rest
mm.
of your life's happiness.
yeah.
What good is that?
It's
So,
Was
yeah,
yeah.
love again, bring it on.
No, it makes me think of a couple things. You know, I've talked to you guys about Jane, also known as Nightbird for anyone who was a fan of her. She had this saying that she would always say, which was defiantly hope. You
mm,
know, like to have defiant hope for your future. And you can apply, you know, for her that was with illness, but like you can apply that to love, you can apply that to your professional aspirations, to your spiritual aspirations, you know. And then also, I saw this thing this morning on Instagram. My friend Anna, who I've had on the podcast, we did an episode on Reiki. She's always posting these like really amazing spiritual things. And it was this thing about how we are just a collection of energy, right? And who we think we are is actually just a collection of our memories that our energy has amassed essentially. And so because energy is always shifting and changing, you are always one shift away from moving in any direction.
yeah.
And so like you can choose which direction you want to shift and move that energy into. And I think that just piggybacks on what you're saying, Joe. You know, it's like you can let this experience, this traumatic experience, this grief just keep you stagnate and even deteriorate, you
Mm,
know. And choosing to put that one foot in front of the other and to like choose to see a future for yourself that uh, is joy filled, that has promise, that's bright, that's surrounded by like people that you love and that you're choosing to be in community with is like a fucking inspiring thing to like
But it's
choose
the
to
same
do.
with choosing to divorce too. Like that also
Mhm.
doesn't pertain to just the aftermath of leaving someone. It also
Mhm.
pertains to making the choice, stand up for
Yeah.
yourself, show up for yourself.
Yeah.
If you have been thinking about getting a divorce because your relationship is just so on the rocks that there's no clear path forward, chances are you really do have to get divorced and it's not going to be saved. Don't waste another second. Don't waste another second. Life is
Mm.
too short and also inexplicably long. There is so much to be had for the rest of your life. It's not worth sitting around trying to figure out if you can make it work, or, you know, obviously take that with a grain of salt. You know, I'm certainly not suggesting everybody who gets upset over spilt milk in the kitchen gets up and leaves their
but you're
partner.
right. It's that deep knowing. When you get that deep
No, you
knowing,
know. And we are just amazing and magical, and we are soil of the earth, you know. Our intuition is so powerful, and when you know, you know.
Mhm.
And there is no way to unknow the things you know when
Yeah.
you
and
know.
when you know,
That's
but you
true.
don't do it, and then you then you start to hurt your own feelings.
Hurting yourself. You're only hurting yourself.
Truly, if there's anything else that I haven't thought to ask that you guys want to share, please feel free.
I got some amazing advice. I don't remember who said it, and I don't even remember the context, but it's this idea that we are so brainwashed by the idea of permanence, when in reality, nothing lasts.
It's true.
And you never know how long the thing will last. But what is true is that it won't. Whether that intervention is the demise of a relationship, the end of a career, death, just the evolution of becoming a different person, nothing lasts. And the myth of permanence keeps us stuck in relationships we shouldn't be in jobs we shouldn't be in. And this, I wish I could give this person credit, but the idea was to walk through life with open hands and not try to clutch anything when it's trying to evolve. Like, let things settle for as long as they're going to settle, and be in gratitude and present in that reality, knowing that for sure it will end at some point. Because grasping onto things that are no longer for you, or things that are just meant to be for a season, is how you is why there is suffering. And when I think about that, when I think about okay, my marriage, I had this fallacy of permanence, that it should be permanent, that it should last until the day I die. That whole thing caused me to make choices and act in ways that were not helpful for me or for him. And now, in context of that experience was for a season, a good long season. I really learned a lot. I really loved a lot. And I really felt a tremendous amount of pain. And I'm glad that it was there for its season. I let it kind of linger on the vine and it got rotten, but now it's gone. And then something else will come for a season. And that just, I wish I had that advice back then, or that point of view of nothing lasts. And isn't that an amazing thing?
My boyfriend said the same thing to me yesterday, actually. He was like, the thing about relationships is every single one of them lasts until one of them doesn't. Stop it.
I need to sidebar about the title.
I'm sorry, you're what?
Oh, come on, it's been a year. You guys know.
I
You
know.
used the word.
I know. I was just Jess and I looked at each other and we're like,
but he made it. He was like, they all last until they don't. No, sorry, I'm butchering his words. He said they all end until one of them doesn't. That's what he said. I'm sorry. He said it totally the wrong way around. He was like, every relationship ends until one of them just doesn't, and it's not. You can't go into it going, this one's not going to end. They all end. Yeah. At some point, you might meet somebody that all of a sudden you look down and it's been 40 years and you're like, holy shit, how did that happen? That's the kind of relationship I feel like I'm wanting to get into if I get into another serious long-term thing again, is that I want to look down 40 years later and go, oh shit, wow, it has been, shit, it's been 10 years, wow. It should be a surprise. I want it to be a surprise that it's been that long, because it doesn't feel it,
Yeah, fully. I love you guys so deeply.
Love you too.
I can't say that enough. I hope that this is really helpful for anyone who finds this episode. I'm really grateful to you guys for sharing. I know this is not an easy thing to talk about and to kind of dredge up, but I had considered doing an episode on this, and I thought it would be good to do kind of a round table. It's my first 3-person episode, and what better two women to have than you guys. Thank you guys so much for doing it. I love you.
It's a pleasure, for real, and very healing to talk about.
Yeah, it is. It's good to talk about it.
Thanks so much to Joe and Jess for having this vulnerable, frank, insightful conversation with me today. I hope this episode finds whoever needs to hear it. And again, I hope it either inspires you to reconnect in your marriage or shows you that there is life with a capital L after divorce, if that's the route you end up taking as well. Also, I just wanted to shout out my friend Laura Lee, who was one of my first guests on the podcast. She has recently expanded on her holistic chef business last year to include coaching to help women relieve the psychological and physiological symptoms of heartache and divorce with food and exercises for the mind and body. She has been dropping some fire knowledge with some really refreshing perspectives over on Instagram and TikTok. And if you're someone who needs support in this area of your life right now, you can go connect with her over at llbalanced.com. She's just fantastic, and she is a great resource on this topic. If you want to connect with Jess on Instagram, you can do that at Jessica Childress Music, and you can connect with Johanna on Instagram at White Prism Music. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Danny Official, or you can connect with me over on TikTok at FTFE Pod. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, and go ahead and share the show with a friend. That is the best thing that you can do for us, and we so appreciate it. By us, I mean me. First Time for Everything is produced by Two Shoeless Productions, and our theme song, Closer, is sung by me, written by me and my friends in the Royal Foundry, and produced by the Royal Foundry. Thank you all so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late for your first time.